what got you into film?
Well, I mean, some of the first memories I have are of movies that I've seen and things that I was super stoked about. I remember the first time that I realized that I could make movies of my own. We had this really, really crappy old home video camera, and it was a JVC. I remember that thing like crazy, that I used it so much that eventually I had to keep the video trap closed with my hand, and I'd broken off the viewfinder, so it was actually just like the original size, and I could hardly even see anything, so I had to do like this crazy method. But my parents have 30 different videos, like actual JVC tapes full of movies that we made over the years. And then I did my student teaching here at the open school, and that's when I started teaching the film stuff. And teaching it kind of makes you get more into something and more in depth into the processes. And so that's where I became more fascinated with the actual process of filmmaking. And before that, I had done some writing here and there for a studio that I just finished up some work with again. But I kind of just fell into it. It was one of those things where I was super passionate about it, and it just kind of has always been there.
I actually had a JVC. Like, that was my first camera. It has tapes, and I have tapes, and my friends and I, we decided to make a lot of movies. I didn't actually go through with it. When I was younger, I actually got editing software. I don't remember what it was. I got a green screen with it. It's like
okay.
5 foot by like 5'4".
That's crazy.
It's really small.
Well, I mean, you can do a lot with that. That's the thing, though, is with your age as opposed to mine, and I'm not that much older than you, for us, we didn't have any editing capabilities. I mean, if you wanted to edit video, you had to spend about $2,000 on an editing program that would be impossible for somebody like your age or when I was your age to actually figure out. And so what I would have to do is we would have to watch a scene and make sure that it all worked together, and if it didn't, we would rewind back to the point where it didn't work, and then we would just tape over that. And so eventually tape starts to wear out the more that you use it and like record over something. And so at times it would just look like there was like 75 like freakish ghosts dancing on one scene because all of those rewrites were going over each other. It was bad news. It was very bad news. And then I remember that my biggest achievement in life, or my biggest excitement in life at that time, was when I got a light on the front of my video camera. My whole world opened up. I was like, now I don't have to worry about overhead lighting. I've got it on the front at all times. And it was super cheesy. It was really bad.
And nowadays they have like the little lights in the cameras. Like, they have them at the school ones. They're so awful. They don't even light them up.
That is true, because now it's just like a little LED, like poops light on your face, and that's all you've got.
It's so bad. Did you attend any like film schools when you were younger, like to get yourself more into it and stuff?
I didn't actually. Pretty much self-taught. Figured things out on my own, and it's interesting because those days where I was using the JVC, I used to do this process that I didn't even know what it was. That I figured if I would hit the record button, and I'd have a Lego character in the frame, and I would push record, and then I would stop, and I would move his leg a little bit, and I would hit record, and I would stop. And I noticed that when I did this, it actually looked like that character was magically moving. I had no idea that that was considered stop motion animation. And 2 years ago, I got hired by a company to do a stop motion animation film, and it was super, super successful. And I never thought that those things that I was doing when I was 11 or 12 years old on my video camera would have actually paid off in the future. We won 2 awards on the film because it was considered really good stop motion animation. It all started because of my record, stop, move, record, stop. So that was my education, was just actually doing it. It was a very open school education on filmmaking.
Yeah, that's sort of like how people learn these days.
Yeah.
in my opinion, like the success of filmmakers is from like their childhood. It's something that happened. Like that's where you get all your creativity is when you're younger, and your ideas when you're younger will come and help you when you're older.
Absolutely. Steve Martin was, I read his book Born Standing Up, like I've read it like 50 times, but he talks about the idea that every single thing he's ever learned, like every skill he's ever learned, he's been able to apply it to his creative career. And that's one thing that I kind of took away as like, so everything that I'm learning is going to apply somewhere if I take the initiative to do so. And that's, I think, a cool way to look at it is just like you said, that anybody who has a desire to go somewhere, no matter what you learn upon that journey or during that journey, you're going to be able to use it somewhere down the road.
If you were to like go, if you would want to take this as like a full-time, all you want to do, which is sort of what you do now, but like would you want to like, if you want to go into the big sort of like
go Hollywood on it?
Yeah, go Hollywood on it. Would you like do a film school? Or?
I don't know if I would go to film school. One thing that I'm learning is that the process, I think that it's great, film school is great for people who are wanting to go into cinematography or who are wanting to go be a colorist or wanting to go into editing or into, well, even production. I don't necessarily think film school is super necessary, but for those other practices and other professions within film, I think that it's important. My desire would be to go into writing/directing, and I feel like with that, I mean, you look at people like Woody Allen. Woody Allen never went to film school. The first time that he ever did anything with film was the first day that he showed up for his first movie. And he went through the process, and they shot his first film, and he said it was such a miserable experience that he, as a contractual thing put in there, that he would only do it if he could direct his own movies. And they said yes. So the second movie that he starred in, he directed, and he'd never ever been in film other than that first movie. So he said that he would go home every single night after shooting and read up on basically directing for dummies. And then the next morning he would show up and have this crew with a multi-million-dollar budget behind it, and he'd say, okay, let's try this. And I mean, he's considered one of the best filmmakers of the 20th century. So it all depends on what you look at as an education. I mean, I also look at Quentin Tarantino, never went to film school.
He's like one of the best. He actually created his own genre.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I don't think that there's a lack of benefit to going to film school, but I also think that people who think that film school is going to make them a better filmmaker, I think is kind of mistaken, because, I mean, that's assuming that everyone who goes to school is smart. And you and I both know that that's not the case. That you have to be able to have the heart and the desire to do it, and film school will give you the tools to do those things. Whereas for me, once again, I'm more hands-on, so I look at the classroom as kind of like a, get out of my way, I want to just do it. So no, I wouldn't, to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I don't think that I would go to film school if I decided to go to Hollywood.
I was actually, in my opinion, I really want to go to film school. I don't know why, because like I really want to go into editing.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of my favorite thing to do right now. It changed that I used to cinematography. First it was directing though,
Mm-hmm.
then I realized.
Well, I'll say this, that if I were 18 again, I would go to film school, because it's something that I've always wanted to do, but in the back of my mind I was like, better get a real person job. Mm-hmm. And so I pursued a different career path, which I'm stoked about. But if I could have done both at the same time and gotten more film knowledge, it would have been a gamble that was well worth it for me. So I think that you deciding to do that is a very good decision, because you know that's where you want to go.
Like you said earlier, like you want to go into like writing and directing. If you were to do that, like is that what you would want to do, or would you like want to go into the other jobs also?
Well, I think that's the good thing about being a director is that you have the overall vision, but you're also able to dabble in the actual creative process of that. So I don't have to be an amazing visual effects artist. I can go in there and say, hey, this is what I want, and watch them do it without having to have the skill. So, I mean, essentially a director is somebody who has the ability to boss people around, but not necessarily all of the skills in those areas. And I like bossing people around.
No. Truthfully, if it was me, I would go into every single thing, because like everything just seems so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like writing stories, and like in that I envision it in my head, and so I know how I want it to look like through each segment. But in that, it just not everybody envisions it the way I do,
Mm-hmm.
and so it sort of like becomes a little bit more complicated. And that's like one thing that I've learned is like you never really want the writer to work on the film. You want like somebody to write it for you, because then they will be posse.
Well, I think that there's a very fine line there because of the way that film relationships go. I mean, the trip that I was just on in Seattle, the director of the project and myself, we spent 3 days sitting in a room just hashing out every story that we could think of for the project that we were doing. We were like, okay, how do we get our character to change the way that we want to? And so the director's vision and my vision were so closely aligned that we were able just to go straight forward with it. And now that I know, since I've written the project, he can take it as the director and further the vision that I have. And once the final project is actually animated and done, I'll be able to say that's exactly what we envisioned. Whereas if you don't work with the right people, if you're collaborating with somebody who doesn't have the same vision that you are, you could want them to animate a circle and the end product is a giant oblong square freakish looking thing, and they're like, this is just what I envisioned in my head. So I do agree to an extent that once you write the piece you hand it off to the director, but there has to be some sort of collaboration there, because I mean, have you seen Brave?
No, I haven't. I didn't really want to, but
Visually it's good. The story's a little bit rough and kind of overdone, but the thing about it is, what's her name? Brenda Chapman is the one who actually wrote the story to Brave, and they hired her as the director as well. And halfway through the project, she had just gotten so muddied with her thoughts that they finally ended up just like putting her as a director, but didn't actually have her do anything with the project. They had another guy come in and essentially start the entire movie over. So her vision was completely lost on that, and she doesn't even work for Pixar anymore, because the second that movie was done, she's like, I'm out of here because you have destroyed my idea of what this story should be and instead done something else. So that's one side where when you don't collaborate with people who have the same vision, you kind of get screwed.
Yeah, it's all like up to who you can communicate best with. How many films have you worked on in the Seattle thing? What is that?
Well, it's a production company called The Academy. With them, I've done, this is my second project with them. The first one is called When I Grow Up. It was another animated short, and I worked on the story and the script with that. This one I did story and script, and some character work. And I've shot, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 commercial projects, and one mini documentary. We're getting ready to do another one. So altogether, I'd say I've done probably, with the ones I haven't mentioned, probably 18 different projects in the last year and a half.
Oh, you're really busy.
It's very busy, very busy.
How do you feel about where modern film is?
Modern film, I think modern film is great as long as you don't start using visual effects just to please people. And I'm pretty much sickened by the idea of all 3D. Anything 3D drives me nuts. Because I'm just like, this is just a gimmick for people to pay $6 extra to see the same movie they could in 2D.
And it's not even 3D.
Exactly. It just kind of pops out at you and gives you a migraine by the end. That I think that modern cinema, the one thing that's very interesting is the fact that more independent directors are able to have more capabilities at their fingertips. So independent film is becoming a lot more cinematically rich. And they have more opportunity to be cinematically rich. Whereas before, they were constrained by budget because they didn't have the money to do all these things. But now with like Creative Suite and all of the Adobe software, you can make a multi-million-dollar movie on a shoestring budget. So that's what I think is cool about it. But I also think that the beauty of cinema is getting lost. That it's becoming Michael Bay Transformers. And everyone's just like, let's see moving parts and put computer animation in everything. It's like, there's a time for that, but whatever happened to Casablanca? Or whatever happened to Citizen Kane, that the only thing that it had going for it was its visual stunning qualities. And there are very few films that do that anymore.
Yeah, like actually Transformers, the main thing that pisses me off is like, they just like, they're really showy offy sort of, like, there's like the opening scene, like the Transformers are like, yeah, and they're doing it, and it like takes like 5 minutes for them to actually transform. Then like, whenever it happens anywhere else, it takes like half a second, and then they just like run, they're a car, and then they're a transformer, and they cut off a guy's head.
Yes, but it's all just sensationalism, that it's just like, let's make things flash and bang just for the sake of flash and bang, but it doesn't necessarily get you more into the character of Shia LaBeouf, or what's her name with the
Megan
crazy
Fox.
thumbs, yeah. Megan Fox. She's got hammer thumbs that look like toes. It's weird looking. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why I don't like Avatar, because I feel like Avatar opened a door that is never going to be shut now, that everyone just wants to do green screen. And if you can do green screen and anything along those lines, motion capture, anything like that, takes away the simplicity and the art of the medium.
Yeah, Titanic, they actually built like a 2/3 scale Titanic, and like now they'd only do that, which actually sunk, and they have a giant pool in Mexico, but now they just animate that.
Mm-hmm.
And it does ruin it. It makes it less realistic and more annoying. Truthfully, like, one of my favorite films is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, animation on animation with like the people,
Live action,
like,
yeah.
it can be really annoying after a while, but that, like, it's the first time that they ever did that, really, and it just made it so like nice. And
well, I think what's cool about it is that it was innovative without it being a gimmick. That's I think the key component is if you're using your tools, because that's what editing is, that's what video is, that's what everything in the film industry is you're using a tool to tell a story. And that's where my philosophy comes from, that if something that you're using fuels the story and makes it more rich, and you're making those characters more relatable to the viewer, then use it like crazy. And that's what Roger Rabbit did, is that it didn't just say, hey, let's put live action characters in with animated figures. It said that these characters are going to grow and change because of the animated characters. And so you see that inner how do I want to say this? An interaction of sorts causes growth between both of them, that it's not just them saying, hey, look at the special effects we can do. I mean, that's fine for Film Riot, but if you're trying to get that sensationalism on the screen, nobody's going to buy it after a while. Well, people who love Transformers and everything Michael Bay does will eat it up. Yeah, like, and that's the problem.
Yeah, like, I have only seen the first two Transformers in theaters. The third one I saw on Netflix, but like, it's just coming to be really, really pathetic. And you were saying that like it transformed the characters, which it does in some way. Like, no, I don't want to kill this Decepticon. Like, no, you must, or you will die.
Yeah.
Like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit's like the main guy has to save all the bunnies from the sludge which melts them.
Which I think, yeah, and I agree that, I think to add to that point, when I have no problem with the actual like digital creations in Transformers, what I have a problem is during the scenes where the Earth is literally crumbling under everybody, and you can tell that all they're doing that for is to make it like visually awesome. It's like 3 dudes got into a room with editing equipment and drank a bunch of Monster energy drinks and were like, let's just do this. And it just came out really ugly, in my opinion. And so once again, if it's done correctly, I think it's great. But I think too often, the filmmaker, whether that be the director or the cinematographer or the visual effects coordinator, is so focused on showing off what they can do that they forget about telling a story.
Yeah, like nowadays, like truthfully, in my opinion, the best movies are they have minimal animation. They're all it's live action, but like an explosion or two here or there on a building that they can't really explode. Like in Skyfall, like MI6, they blew that up. But they had to do it on special effects because it's MI6. It's illegal to blow up.
Exactly. Then once again, if it feeds the story and makes it work, then yeah. I mean, look at the last 9 the last nominated Best Pictures. There were 9 this last year, and I'm trying to think if any of them had insane visual effects.
Life of Pi. In my opinion, Life of Pi. I actually haven't seen the movie. I have like barely seen any movies this year. I saw Django Unchained,
which is great,
this weekend.
It was a brutally violent film.
My favorite part of that film is there was this one death, and he shoots her, and she like does a backflip, flying into the other room. She's like,
oh, at the very end there? Yeah.
Rockets into the other room.
Well, and what I thought was hilarious is the physics of that were so off that he shot her at an angle and she flew just straight back.
They had to have like a harness on her.
Yeah.
They like pulled her back.
Which is what I love about Quentin Tarantino, is that his violence is just humorous. And so anybody who's like, well, Tarantino's films are just gratuitously violent, it's like saying, have you actually seen it? It's like trying to say that a Sam Raimi horror film is actually like causing people to go out and pour literally hundreds of gallons of blood on somebody. It's just to the point where it's over the top comical. And that's what I love about it. Did you see Life of Pi?
No, I haven't, but I've seen the trailers of it, and I don't really think it has that great of special effects in my opinion.
You know, actually, I think that Life of Pi is the only movie I've ever said that I would like to see in 3D, because the visual effects in certain areas are incredible. I will say this, that to that movie's credit, they used visual effects perfectly, other than in the very beginning. They did a lot of CGI with the tiger, and it made the story 10 times better instead of using a real tiger, because you actually saw the emotion of the character in the tiger, and you saw the interaction with Pi in the boat, and you really believed the tension. Whereas if you had an actual tiger in there...
They did use an actual tiger.
Well, they went back and forth. That there was a tiger, but then there was also a CGI tiger that you couldn't tell the difference by. And that's what I thought was so good about that movie, is that the CGI tiger was never different looking than the real tiger. It's super impressive. But the story I thought was okay.
It's an impossible film. They filmed it well.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I agree with that.
Has probably one of the highest respects in the filmmaking industry now, because that's impossible.
They made the impossible possible, which is good.
It's really good. They just used a blue screen room. That's all they used, and a pool.
That's crazy. It was beautiful. You should definitely see it because, like I said, the story didn't jump out at me, but I could watch it for 6 hours just because of the visual effects and the settings that they use.
You're talking like the what?
Yeah.
I hate the settings.
Yeah,
I abandoned the book and I never abandoned it.
well, that's the thing is, I feel like the story just never. I mean, I understand it's a philosophy book and nobody's ever going to take their side, but it's like, make a point and stick to it. Instead of just sitting in the middle of the road and saying, well, both cars look nice. Come on.
Amazing analogy there.
So,
Amazing terms.
yes. Yeah.
Both cars look nice. Which road should I jump into?
Well, because that's precisely what the story was all about. And so, conflicting ideologies never can find harmony. And that's the thing I think is funny is people are like, well, let's try to find harmony within these conflicting ideologies. And it's like, there's a reason why they conflict, is because both of them believe strongly about themselves. And I prefer that than people or ideas watering themselves down just so everybody can get along. That's my thought. What else have you got for me, Maxis?
What was your favorite part of teaching this class last year?
Favorite part of teaching the class last year? I think my favorite part was probably seeing students like you and Joey and other people in the class who were actually passionate about the topic. That you guys had been waiting, it seemed like, for a very long time for a film class to be taught here at the open school.
Truthfully, not to cut you off,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't probably be in 9th grade right now if it wasn't for you teaching that class. 'Cause
really?
I had no inspiration to do my digs, which I wanted to do on filmmaking, but I had no inspiration to do it until you came and taught the class.
Well, good. That makes me feel good, Max. And I'm glad that it helped because I think it was like the perfect storm that occurred. That there were kids here, like yourself, who really wanted that outlet but just didn't have somebody to take them to that place. And so taking that class, there are a lot of things that I would have done differently in the class. But just having that space available for you guys to know that you can create and you can explore ideas and that you can be inspired to do creative projects is what I love most about that class. I forgot about all the projects we did. I forgot about everything else that we did in that class. But the thing that I remember is the passion that you guys had for your projects and how much thought, especially your group, put into it. I could tell that you weren't there just because you had to fill 4th period. You were there because you really wanted to delve into the ideas of filmmaking. So that's what I love most about it. And I'm stoked that you're doing it this year.
Actually, like, now that you talked about it, like, I see where you're coming from. This year, I haven't gotten that. Like, I'm trying to do a horror. People, like, I have it due on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
People, like, there's one group, they decided, like, oh, we're gonna do a horror, a movie on gay suicide or something. Like,
Okay.
Like,
And it's a horror?
no, it's not horror. It's
Okay.
like,
It's like, that sounds...
it's like, I just watched it because they're editing it today because we've been having so much editing issues lately. Like,
Because of the computers here?
the Premiere, like, when we tried to upload videos onto it,
It crashes all the time, I bet.
no, not even that. It just won't even, like, it turns the clips purple and fuzzy.
Have you looked at import issues? Like the actual file
no.
that you're importing?
Because
Are you using Premiere Pro or Elements?
$70 one.
Okay, so you've got Elements. What you need to do is you need to look at your import settings because that's probably what's going on with that. The presets that go into Adobe Premiere, especially with the Elements, that's the one thing that I came up against is you need to go into your settings and pick the right format for your codecs, which sounds complicated, but if you just watch a YouTube tutorial, it'll walk you through that, and that might help you out.
Yeah, like what you were talking about earlier is like it's going into modern age, this film. Like that's all. Like the kids, like they're like, we have to write it on my computer. I can't write it because my computer hard drive crashed.
Mm-hmm.
and like, ooh, can we put animation here? And I'm like, do what you want.
But the problem is, you want something, but you can't have something at the level where you're at. And so how do you, once again, that's what I love about cinema from the 1920s, that they worked with what they had. And that's what makes it so charming, is it's not Titanic and it's not Avatar, but there is a charm to it because you see that they told the story with what they have. And I think that might be something you want to tell the students in your class. It's just saying, you can do whatever you want when you have that money. But right now, you don't have the budget for this. So do what you can. And so what were you saying about the horror genre thing with the lack of inspiration, you feel?
I know that there's one group, they've been really sort of secretive, and they said that since it's due on Tuesday, they're going to get it done on Tuesday. I don't know what their progress is at. I keep asking. I ask around, but for some reason they never answer. And like the group that's doing they're making fun of this girl because she's a lesbian or something.
Okay.
And I went over and watched their edited version. It's not fully done, but we have to result on using Windows Movie Maker now.
Okay.
But they had some inappropriate language, interest, facts about 21.5 kids a year kill themselves.
Okay. And so, what is the biggest issue there, do you think?
There's nothing wrong with it, but they do use what they have.
Mm-hmm.
There was this scene, what they're doing at the end is they're making the girl kill herself. Mm-hmm. But what they did is no, she doesn't even kill herself. She's looking out a window and somebody pushes her. So they have it they put red paint on her, threw red paint on the snow. They made her look dead.
Mm-hmm.
But
it probably doesn't look that great.
It doesn't look that great, but it's good for what we have.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's the thing that's amazing is you look at Jaws. Have you seen Jaws?
Yes.
It is a phenomenal movie. But what Steven Spielberg found with the actual, for lack of a better term, Jaws was an animatronic character.
Yes, he was a robot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait, is Jaws one of your favorite movies?
I don't know. No, Jaws isn't really one of my favorite movies. My favorite movie is Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah, because there was somebody in class who was talking about Steven Spielberg because Jaws... Oh, I think that was Gage. I think Jaws is his favorite movie. But what they were saying is that the animatronic never worked.
Yes.
It never worked. And so instead of showing these things, he would imply it. You would see blood in the water and you would see a lot of movement. You'd never see the shark biting into anybody sometimes, but you knew it was happening. And just like with that scene, Nancy actually did a wonderful, horribly sad but moving depiction of suicide. That you weren't seeing a girl hang herself. All you saw was a girl step off of a chair and her legs just dangling. And that right there is the power of suggestion, and that's what I love so much about film, is you don't have to show somebody tying up a noose and hanging themselves. You just show their feet swaying back and forth. And that is going to move people just as much, even more, than seeing the gruesome reality of suicide. That you're going to get that emotion out of it. And so I think that's something that would be a great project for you guys to do, is get the power of suggestion on your side and use that within the class. How can you portray somebody falling in love without showing them falling in love? Or how can you get a character to show that they've killed themselves without showing them that they've killed themselves? I think one thing that's really cool is a project that I'm working on in the summertime. It's going to be a love story, but you're only going to see people's feet. That it will start out with the girl trying on 25 different pairs of shoes, just like a girl tries on dresses. You see the guy like getting all nervous and tying up his shoelaces really nice. You never see any of their upper body. All you see is from the knee down.
Fixing up their socks, putting on dress pants.
Exactly. And you see them walking through areas. You'll see somebody like drop a scoop of ice cream on his shoe because they got dessert together. All these different romantic things, but you never show the people. You only show their feet.
There is my Jack and I, he's actually doing his, there's 3 people this year doing their thing on filmmaking. There's Jack, there's Van, and there's me. And so Jack and I, we decided to write this movie for his door. And there's this part of it where this kid, he's being haunted. And so he decides to get a gun and shoot the thing that's haunting him. It sounds a little pathetic, but like, in our way, like in my mind's like how we do it, because I have an airsoft shotgun, and so what's going to happen is he's going to be walking around his house and it's dark, and then he bounces into somebody, but he thinks it's like the figure, and then he turns around and shoots, and like all you're going to see is the shot, and then it'll hit him in the head and knock him out, and you don't know who he's shot until like they tell him, like when he wakes up he's at like an insane asylum, and you don't know who he shot, and like they're in but like what we did is like the power of suggestion. In my opinion, that's one way that we're doing is like nobody knows who they shot until like a couple minutes after, so if we do it right, then we can keep it a little like people like off their feet, like oh man, what he shot, who he shoot. And like there's gonna be like an interview, like he's getting interviewed, like why did you do it? Why did you kill him? And then like I don't know who I killed. You killed your father.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important thing, to be able to tell a story well that way. That you build the tension, and once again, like you said, through the power of suggestion. Have you ever seen Signs by M. Night Shyamalan?
No.
Sixth Sense?
Is that the one where he makes the potato mountain?
No, that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. No, Signs is a movie about aliens, and you should watch it. It's really good. It's terrifying in my opinion. But it's about aliens and abduction, and they're basically trying to take over the Earth. And what happens is the way M. Night Shyamalan does it is you never actually see the alien. You never see anything like that. And all you see is like a silhouette of this hulking beast on the roof. But that's all you see. And then you'll see a foot pull into the cornfield and the stalks shake. Or, I mean, just thinking about it gives me chills because it's terrifying. But the thing that isn't terrifying is the second he shows the alien at the end. It's horrible computer graphics, and it ruins the entire film. Up until that point, it's the scariest film I've ever seen in my life. But then it shows it, and you're like, oh my gosh, give me a break. And so that is what, in my opinion, the power of suggestion is a stronger tool most times than actually showing the character, especially in horror. Because you need something, the human mind is a lot more capable of creating terror than the actual visual eye is. And that's why, I mean, if you study anything by Hitchcock, that's why he was a genius. Is he just left you enough to ruin your day because of the places that your mind went with the thoughts. So if you haven't seen anything by Hitchcock, I strongly suggest checking out especially Psycho and Vertigo for those very reasons.
Yeah, like Tell.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
They put this virus like that. Like this girl, she's haunting him, and it's just horrifying. And you don't know what's happening, like what's haunting him, and it's just frightening.
Well, yeah, and you know what's interesting is that Ryan Connolly is all about DIY visual effects and all that kind of stuff. And if you'll notice in Tell, there are hardly any visual effects.
No, they're really, except for like blood, but that's...
Exactly, but even the blood, I think, in that wasn't post-production. I think that he used legit blood in that. And that's the thing that's amazing, is he teaches you how to do it, but he doesn't use it himself.
He does use it like his other thing.
Well, yeah, but Tell is without a doubt his biggest project. And you see that he goes away from that because he realizes that he's an amazing storyteller, that he doesn't need those things to make his story strong. That once again, it is the power that moves within you to freak out. That he doesn't show you what you're freaking out about, he tells you about what you're freaking out about. And that's the thing, is, I should say he suggests, because it's always better to show than tell, but he suggests, yeah, yeah, that's funny. He tells you through the suggestion of what you're going to see. So instead of seeing that throat getting cut, he'll show the movement of the knife, and then he'll show the blood splatter on the kitchen wall.
Yeah.
You don't ever see that, but you know the way the mind connects things, you have a more brutal, gruesome image of the throat getting cut than anything he could show you.
Yeah, I remember showing Tell to my class.
Oh, yeah.
And at the beginning, he goes to his car and you don't know what he's holding. And then he walks up to his house and he hits her with the hammer. But nobody knows that. They know that he was going, they assume that he's going to kill her, but he doesn't know how. And then everybody afterwards, they were like, oh man, he's going to kill him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the building of tension that he uses in that. Excuse me. It's been a long day, Max. How Ryan Conley builds tension in that beginning sequence is huge. Because if you think about it, the most action occurs at the very beginning and the very end. And everything else is pretty well spaced out and not super intense as far as visual action goes. But he uses angles, he uses tone, so the actual look of the film, and he uses music to pull out this suspense and this terror from his audience, which is genius.
Yes, when he falls and hits the head on his hammer, he only uses sound. He sees the foot trip on the blood, and that's it. There's the sound of a
Mm-hmm.
and then the dude just wakes up.
Yep.
With blood on his head.
Exactly. You don't see any of the in-betweens, because you don't need to see the in-betweens. Especially if it's not going to look good, don't put it in there.
Yeah, you usually want to...
Okay, so...
the bare necessities, sort of. The bare necessities is sort of what you want to use, because people they use too much. They show it normal people who oh man, this would look nice, of the fact that he falls and hits his head. Oh man, I should totally show that, but it's completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's happened if you use the correct sound effects.
Yes.
For example, you could be shooting somebody, and you run out of ammo, and you can't really see it on the gun, but the clicking, then you'll know that they're out of ammo, and then they just throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also know, but still, you don't have to show.
You don't have to see it.
Yeah.
And honestly, you could do a quick cut of having a gun and you shoot somebody, and then all you see is fast movement. You see the look in somebody's eye, you pull away, and you have the gun barrel smoking.
Yeah, one thing that I like doing is if there would be a gunshot, you'd have the muzzle, especially at the end of a movie, oh, we're gonna kill this person, or just ends the movie. You have it the camera pointed at the muzzle, and then they shoot, and all you
so this is the last call
you
for
see them
any student who
pulling the
writes
trigger sort of, but then right as the
come
gun
down
actually
to the
starts,
Commons in front of
right
the
as
main
you hear it,
last call
the noise
for
breaks.
W47.
It cuts to black and there's the noise.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I really like that, because you know that it happened, but you just don't have to show it.
Mm-hmm. I want to say that there was a movie called Shoot 'Em Up that did that exact ending, and it was genius the way they ended it. The movie itself was pretty awful, but the ending was very good. Was that you or me?
That's you. Oh, it was your iPad.
Oh, it's a weird noise. I don't know why it would make that.
I think it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, I gotta get going.
Okay,
For
well,
sure.
thank you for interviewing with me.
Sure.